Hey guys, welcome to your next project. So this is called GitHub Finder, and basically we're going to use the GitHub REST API to be able to search users and get their profile data and display it nicely. So before I go into the demo, I just want to explain kind of the point of this project, or points. So one is to deal with a third-party API, because that's something you're probably going to do quite a bit. So we're working with the GitHub REST API. And then the second thing, I want to dive more into the context API, and instead of just using the useState hook within our context like we did in the feedback app, I want to use reducers. And reducers are basically, they're pure functions that are used to manipulate parts of your state. Okay, so we'll be using reducers along with a hook called useReducer. So even though this is kind of a smaller app in terms of functionality, there's a lot that I want to get into and explain through creating this app. So we will be refactoring it a couple times as well, so I can explain things clearer. Now, I do want to just give a quick shout out to Hasib Modisar. He actually took the first version of this course and that project, and he redid the entire UI with Tailwind, and also this Tailwind component called Daisy UI, which gives us some higher level classes for buttons and alerts and things like that. So that's what we're going to be using, Tailwind for our framework along with Daisy UI. So just to give you a quick demo, we can search a user. If we have no field in here, we'll get a nice little alert that shows up and goes away. So we will have an alert context as well. But if I just search for, let's say, Brad, you'll see it'll give me some cards with some users. I can clear the state as well, but if I click on view profile, it'll take me to a nice looking profile where it has the image, the bio, some other information like location, stats, followers, following, etc. And then we'll also make another request to the API to fetch the user's repositories. I think it's the latest 20 repositories, but of course you can change that if you want. And these all have links to go to the repos as well. And then we just have an about page, very simple. And then if we go to something that doesn't exist, so I'll just go to slash and then a bunch of junk, and you'll see we'll get this 404 not found page. And then I also want to deploy the application. So as you can see, I have it deployed to Vercel, which is a great platform for React and other types of projects. All right, so that's it. Let's go ahead and get started. All right, guys, so we're going to get started on our GitHub Finder project. And like I said in the intro, we will be using Tailwind CSS, which is a low-level CSS framework. And it gives us a whole bunch of utility classes. And in addition to that, we're going to use Daisy UI, which is a Tailwind plugin that gives us a bunch of component classes, things like buttons and alerts and so on. All right, so to get started with Tailwind, there's this really nice guide that we can follow. And this is at tailwindcss.com/docs/guides/create React app. So the first thing we want to do is create a new project. So we'll go ahead and do that. Let's run npx create-react-app, and we're going to call this GitHub Finder. And I'm just going to add --use-npm. Okay, so that will create a new folder for us with all the files that we need. And I'm not going to go over the real basics of React because I did that in the first project. So if you didn't do the first project, that's fine. Just know that you should know at least the basics of React, things like components, props, state, and so on. Okay, so now that that's done, let's go ahead and CD into GitHub Finder. And from here, I'm going to open up VS Code. Okay, so you can see we have all of our files on the side here. Now, moving along, let's just make that a little smaller. The next thing we want to do is install the dependencies that we need. So we need Tailwind and then some of its peer dependencies like PostCSS and AutoPrefixer. So we're going to just grab this, and I'm just going to paste this into here. Just make sure you're in your GitHub Finder folder when you're installing these dependencies. Okay, and then the next thing that we want to do is install and configure Craco. So since Create React App doesn't let us override the PostCSS configuration natively, we have to install this Craco. And then what we do is we replace the React scripts here in the package.json with Craco for start, build, and test. So first of all, let's install it. So we'll grab that and paste that in here. Okay, and then we'll grab the start, build, and test right here. And that's all set. So let's go into our package.json, and we will just want to replace these 3 lines with the 3 lines that we copied. Save that. Next, we want to create a config file for Craco. So it's going to be called craco.config.js, and we just want to put this in there. Okay, and we just passing in our plugins, our Tailwind CSS and auto prefixer. So in the root, let's create craco.config.js and paste that in, save it, close that up. Then we want to create a Tailwind config file, and we can do that by using npx with the Tailwind CSS CLI and just running init. All right, so let's do that. Let's just clear this up, paste that in, and then you'll see over here it should create a tailwind.config.js file, which by default is going to look like this. And then it's telling us here if we want to remove unused styles for production, we can replace the empty array that's in purge with this here. So I'm going to grab that, and we're going to just replace that here. Okay, and then last thing we want to do is include these 3 lines here in our index CSS. So in our source folder, you should have an index CSS. We're just going to get rid of this stuff here. Paste that in, and that's going to include the different parts of Tailwind, the base, components, and utilities. So we'll save that. And the last thing we want to do, because this is all set, Tailwind should be all set, but for Daisy UI, there's really only 2 steps. We install it with npm, and then we include it as a plugin. So let's go ahead and run npm install Daisy UI. Okay, so once that's installed, we can go over here into our Tailwind config and simply require, and we want to require Daisy UI, and that should all be set up now. So I'm gonna go ahead and open up my integrated terminal here, and I'm gonna run npm start, and that's gonna run our dev server. And you can see here Daisy UI components. All right, now to just kind of test this out and make sure that our Tailwind classes work and all that, let's go to our app.js, so our main app component here, and let's get rid of everything that's in this div. And then what I'll do is test a Tailwind class here. So let's do, we'll do a background color, so BG-purple-500. And then let's do an H1, and we'll do a class name of, let's say, I think it's text-XL, text-XL, and we'll just say hello world. Save that, and now you can see we have the purple background, so we know this class is working. And if we open up our dev tools here and we take a look, you can see the text-XL class here. All right, now that's Tailwind. Let's go ahead and test a Daisy UI class now. So I'll go under the H1 here, and let's create a button and give it a class of BTN. That's a Daisy UI class. We'll just say click. And there we are. So now we have a button from the Daisy UI class. Cool, so everything is set up. Now let's just clean up a little. We don't need like the logo and all that. And then for now, let's just get rid of that. We'll just have just a plain old H1 and just a plain old div. Okay, and then let's just get rid of some of this stuff. We don't need the app CSS file. We can get rid of that. We can get rid of the logo. We don't need setup tests or report vitals or app.test. So we can go ahead and delete those files, and then we'll just have to, in the index.js, get rid of this import for the vitals and get rid of this function down here. Okay, just to kind of clean things up. Now you might be saying, why is the background dark here? The reason for that is Daisy UI comes with themes. You can enable themes, and I'll just show you real quick. The dark is enabled by default, but if we go to components and we go to let's see, themes, so you have all these different themes that are available, and you can either include it in your config. You can disable it, themes false, in your config, or you can change it just within the HTML tag with the data theme attribute. So for instance, if I go into, let's see, public index HTML, and I can add on to here data-theme, and let's say I set that to, not Emerald, let's do Cyberpunk. So if I save that and come back to my app, you'll see we have this theme with the colors and fonts. So Daisy UI is pretty cool, but we're gonna just keep it as the default, which I believe is the dark theme. And then while we're at it, let's just change the title here from React app. Let's change it to GitHub Finder. All right, so now that our Tailwind is all set up, we're gonna go ahead and start to work on the navbar and the footer and some components, install React Router. So we'll continue on in the next video. Okay, so now we're gonna start to create our navbar component. We also want to install the React Router. We're gonna set up a couple routes. So let's open up a new terminal. I have my server running in this one, and let's npm install react-router-dom. I'm also going to install React icons because we'll be using those again in this project. And then we'll go ahead and in our source folder, let's create a folder called components. And we're going to have quite a few components. So I'm going to have subfolders for each category. I'm going to create a folder called layout in components, and that will be just layout things like the footer, the navbar, and so on. So in layout, let's create a folder, or I'm sorry, a file called navbar.jsx. And we'll go ahead and just structure out a React functional component. And we will be using links in the navbar. So in order to do that, we have to implement the router. So let's just hop over to app.js and let's import the router. So up top here, we're going to import, let's say, browser router as router, and then also route. And that's going to be from React Router DOM. And then down here, we just want to make sure we wrap everything in router. Because if we try to use the link in the navbar without wrapping it in this router, then we're going to get an error. And while we're at it, let's just go ahead and we'll just put navbar here, and let's just bring that into our app.js. So let's say import navbar from our components layout folder, and then we'll go ahead and put that in here. Actually, you know what? We're going to have some classes here as well. Let's see. So let's have a div here, and we're going to create a flex column. So we want the class of flex, and then let's do flex-call. These are just Tailwind classes. I want to align the remaining space in between each thing. So basically we'll have the navbar, the main content, and the footer. And we're going to use justify-between. And then I also want it to take up the entire height. So we'll do h-screen, meaning that the height will take the full amount of the screen vertically. All right, so in this div, let's have our navbar. And then we'll also have a main tag here, and any content, we'll just, for now, just put in content, will go in there. So we should now see the navbar at the top, and then content is at the bottom because we have justify between. So we have all that space in between. Okay, so now at least we're showing the navbar. Let's go back into that file. And like I said earlier, I think I said this in the last video, since we're using Tailwind, we're going to have quite a few classes because we're not writing any CSS. Tailwind gives us a whole bunch of utility classes, basically. We are using Daisy UI in addition to that, which gives us some higher level buttons and things like that. But this navbar component will have quite a few classes. So let's bring a couple things in here. We're going to bring in the GitHub logo from Font Awesome. So let's do FA GitHub, and that's going to be from React Icons /FA because it is a Font Awesome icon. And then we want to import link from React Router, or React Router DOM, I should say. And for this nav bar, we'll have the title passed in, which is basically like what we want for the logo. So I'm gonna add prop types. And then for the nav bar, we'll destructure, we'll take in a title, and let's just go down here and say navbar.default props. And I'm just going to set a default for that title, which is just going to be the name of the app, which is GitHub Finder. And let's add the prop type. So navbar dot prop types, and we're going to set the title to prop types dot string. So now we'll go up to the return here. We're going to edit the JSX. Let's first of all make this surrounding element a nav. And this nav is actually going to have some classes on it. So let's say class name. And there's a navbar class that Daisy UI gives us that will add some of the padding and so on for our navbar. I'm also going to do MB12, so that's margin bottom. For the shadow, let's do shadow-LG. That'll give us some drop shadow. And then for the background, we're going to actually do BG neutral, which is also a Daisy UI class. And then text-neutral-content. All right, and then let's just put navbar back in here. Okay, so you can see now we have this slightly darker navbar. Now I do want to have a container because right now you can see it stretches out. This goes all the way to the edge, so I do want to have a container. So in here, let's add a div with the class of container, and let's do MX auto, which will do margin auto on the left and right. And then we'll just move this into here, and now we should have a container. If I widen this, you can see the space here. Now we're going to have another div in here as well. And we're going to give this a class of flex none, and then I just want to add some padding and margin on the x-axis, so px2, mx2. And then let's have our GitHub icon, so fa GitHub. If we save that, you should see the little GitHub logo here. And I want to add a couple classes onto this, so let's say class name, and let's add inline because we're going to have text next to it. Let's do padding right 2. And let's do text-3XL. Okay, so that'll make it a little bigger. And then next to it, what we want to have is our title, which by default is this GitHub Finder, but we do want to wrap it in a link as well. So we'll have a link, and inside there we'll have our title, but let's add on to this link too, and we want that to just go to slash. And then I do want to add some classes onto this as well. So for the link, let's do text large or text LG. Let's do font bold, align dash middle. So now when I save that, we should see the GitHub Finder here. All right, so in addition to that, we want to have some links for the home and about page. We're going to align over here. So let's go underneath this ending div. So you have the link, the ending link, then this div here. We're going to go under that, and let's create a class, or div with a class of flex1, and then px2 and mx2. And then let's go ahead and add a class of flex, and I want to justify to the end, so let's give it a class of justify end. We want the links to be moved over to the right. So the links, let's do link 2. And this is just going to go to slash, and then we're going to have some classes on this. So I'm going to use btn. These are Daisy UI classes. We're going to use ghost, which is basically like a link, but it has a hover effect. So we'll do btn ghost, btn-sm, which is small, and then we're going to do rounded-btn. And that should do it. So we'll close that, and let's say home. So we'll save that. Now if I click on that, nothing's going to happen. We haven't created any routes yet, but let's copy this link here. So we'll copy this down, and this one is going to go to slash about. And we just want to change the text here to about. Okay, so now we have our two links. So in the next video, what I want to do is create the index page, which will be this home link, the about page. We're also going to create a default 404 page for when we go to a route that doesn't exist. So we'll get to that next. Okay, so we need to add some routes, but before we do that, I just want to add the footer because right now the page content is way down at the bottom. And remember, we have a flex column, and we have the space between. So if we have the footer, then it'll be the nav bar, then it'll be the content, then it'll be the footer with equal space in between. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go into components, into layout, and let's create a new file called footer.jsx. And we're going to create a React component here. And I'm actually going to have an SVG in this footer, which obviously you're not going to want to type this out, but you can grab it from the repository. I also want to have the year, and I want that year to update without us having to, manually update it. So let's just create a variable here, and we'll call it footer year, and we'll set that to new date. And we just want the full year, so we can use get full year. And then in the return here, let's return a footer tag, and we're going to give this a couple class names. So first is going to be footer, and that's part of Daisy UI. And let's do padding 10 for the color. Let's do BG-gray-700. And let's do text-primary-content. And let's do footer-center. Okay, and then in here we're going to have a div and then an SVG, which I'm going to go ahead and just grab. I'm going to copy and paste this, which you can do the same. Okay, so it's just an SVG tag. And then underneath that SVG, let's have a paragraph, and let's say copyright. And I'm going to put a ampersand copy semicolon, which will give us the copyright symbol. And then we can put in the footer year. And then, I don't know, we'll just say all rights reserved. You can put whatever you'd like in here. Okay, so let's save that. Now we need to bring that into our app.js. We'll copy this down and change this to footer. Footer. And, excuse me, let's go under the main here, and that's where we're going to put this. Okay, so we'll save. And there we go. So now we have our footer. It has this SVG, the hash SVG, which is completely optional. You can put whatever you'd like. Now for the content, I want that to be in a container because you can see the content goes all the way over. So what we'll do is we'll just add a class, or add a couple classes to the main tag. Let's do container. Let's do MX auto, which will do margin auto. And let's do a little bit of padding on each side, so PX3. And then I also want to do padding bottom 12. All right, cool. So I think we're all set as far as the main layout here. So in the next video, let's start to create some routes. We want our home page, which is basically going to be the search box and then the users that come up when we search, and then the about page, and then we'll also have a not found page for if we go to a page that doesn't exist. Alright guys, so now we want to add some pages and routes. So we have this link up here, home and about. So I want to create those. I also want to have a not found page, so if we go to something that doesn't exist, that not found page shows up. So first off, let's go ahead and just create the pages. So in the source folder, I'm going to create a new folder called pages. And then in pages, we're going to create a home.jsx. Let's create an about.jsx, and we're also going to create a file called, or a page called notfound.jsx. All right, and then we'll just create functions in each of these. So let's do rfce, and just for now, we'll say not found. Save that. Here, this is the about page, rfce, and we'll just say about, and then the home page, home. All right, so now we have the pages created. Now let's go ahead and add the routes. So let's actually just close that up. And actually, before we do the routes, we want to we want to go ahead and bring the pages in. So let's import home from pages, and then we also want about, and then we want the not found. Okay, so we bring in those pages. Now to create the routes, one thing I forgot to bring in up here with React Router version 6, we have to bring in routes as well, and we have to surround all of our routes with that. So down here, let's go into our main tag. We'll get rid of that content, and then let's do routes, and then in here we can create each individual route. So this one, path, is going to be /, and then we're using React Router version 6. If you are using 5 for some reason, then you would do component here, but for 6 we're going to do element, and this is going to be the home element, or the home component, home page, whatever. Let's close that up, and then we'll copy this down 3 more times, and then this one is going to be for about. Okay, so let's do /about here. And then I'm gonna specifically have a /not found just in case I want to send somebody there, and that's going to load not found. You don't really have to do this, but I'm just going to. And then of course we want to have basically a catch-all if they go to / something that doesn't exist. So for that we can actually just do /*, and then we want that to load the not found page. Okay, so let's save that and let's test out our routes. So if I click home, that takes me to the home page, which I'm already on. If I go to about, you can see that takes us to about. And then if I go to / and then anything that doesn't exist, I should see the not found page. All right, so now we just want to add the content. Now the home page ultimately is going to have our user search module or component and our user list, which obviously we don't have yet. So for now I'll just put an h1 here. So let's do h1. We're going to use the Tailwind class text-6xl and just say welcome. Okay, so we'll just keep that for the home page for now. And then for the about page, I'm going to go ahead and add an h1 in here. And let's also do text-6xl. And I also want some margin bottom, so I'm going to do MB4. And we'll just put the name of the app here, so GitHub Finder. And then the rest of this is really just static data, so I'm going to paste it in. If you want, you can grab it from the repo and paste it in. So I just have a paragraph with some classes, just says what the app is. I have a link to the course, although that's not the, I'll have to change that later. And then down here, just the version and the layout by Hasib. He helped with the layout for this. So I'm just going to save that. And if I go to about, we should just see something like this. And of course, you could put whatever you want on this page. Now let's do the not found. So if I go to something that doesn't exist, that takes me to not found. And I'm going to bring in a couple icons from React icons here. So let's say import, or actually just one icon, FA home. And that's going to be from React icons /FA. And then I want to import the link from React Router so that we can have a link back home. So let's say from React Router DOM. All right, and then this outer div here, I'm going to give a class name of hero. And then let's see, inside here, we're going to do a div with the class of text-center and hero-content. And then in there, another div with a class of max-w-large or LG. And then we'll have an h1. And we're going to do text-really big text 8XL. And let's also make the font bold. And let's do margin bottom 8. Okay, and that heading is just going to say oops. So we'll say oops, and then underneath that we'll have a paragraph. Let's do text-5XL, and we'll also at a margin bottom here, we'll do MB8, and we're going to just put 404 page not found. All right, and then I just want a link to go back. So underneath that, let's do a link component, and I'm going to just pass in a couple class names here. We're going to do btn primary, and btn-lg, and these are Daisy UI classes. Okay, and of course we need the to prop that we want to pass in here, and we want to go to the home page. All right, and then inside the link, we'll just say, actually let's do the icon first. So we have an FA home React icon, and I want to push the text over a little bit, so I'm just going to add a class name on this icon of MR, so margin right, we'll do MR2, and then right under that we'll just do back to home. All right, so we'll save that, and there we go. So there's our not found page. Okay, so nothing too exciting, but we're just getting kind of the shell of our application, just getting our layout done. And now we can start to look at the GitHub API because we want to be able to fetch some users and display them here.